Hello and welcome. This is a quick overview of a few of the indicators included in the EKlecticCoreV4 package. Before we begin, I need to say the following presentation is for educational purposes only. All symbols and trading ideas discussed are for demonstration purposes only and are not recommendations. This presentation is not an offer or solicitation of any kind in any jurisdiction where we are not authorized to do business, including but not limited to Hong Kong and Japan. Active trading is not suitable for everyone. Futures trading carries a high degree of risk and is not suitable for all traders. Please read the disclosure information under terms and conditions on the EKlecticCore.com website if you have any more questions. All right, let's get into the EKlecticCoreV4 package. First, I want to demonstrate some of the informational indicators included. First, let's take a look at the chart clock. I'm going to add this indicator to the chart. Default settings are fine. You'll now see down here in the bottom, there is a indication of how far these bars go, the beginning date and time unto the end date and time, and the bars that are actually displayed in the current window. So the chart clock is very handy when you're doing screenshots. It shows you historical data that you'd otherwise not have access to. Let's also look at the instrument report. The instrument report does a powerful analysis of the entire chart and all historical bars on the chart. And so before I present this, take a look at the options here. The display summary overlay on chart, we'll see in a moment. Display the full report to output window is typically checked. Display the last bar report to output window is typically not checked. Otherwise, you get a repeated report for every bar in the history. And you can do full report only, which is a lot faster because it only calculates and displays the report on the final bar for the entire historical data. So let's hit OK, and you'll see what I mean. Here in the top is the overlay on the window. It gives a summary of the average size of all candles, the largest candle size, the smallest candle size, the standard deviation of the entire chart, and how far the biggest run was going up. In other words, from what point on the EMA did it start to run and to what point did that break? And the largest one in the history was almost 7 points. The largest down was 5.827. Just as a overview of what this means, it means that through these historical bars, there are more. It's an average running higher than the average running lower. You also get a confirmation of this here, and the bars up are 1611 and bars down are 1391. That's essentially just a count of green and red bars. You have EMA crossovers, and this is using 4 different EMAs and how many times they crossed each other, and there's details in the documentation for what those actually are. And how many bars on average does it take before a reversal happens? And in this historical sample, that happens about every 6 bars, as you can see. If you look over here on the output window to the right, you get the full summary of the instrument. We see that it's the ES, E-mini, S&P. We get the description. We get the tick size as a quarter, 0.25 that is. Point value is 50. That means that each point on this instrument is worth $50. And every tick on this instrument, dollars per tick, is $12.50. We're currently on a 5-minute chart. The candle wick average sizes and what other statistical data is here, I'm not going to read it all, but you get the idea. And again, there's all the details of this can be found in the documentation on the website. Let's look thirdly at the third informational indicator, which is the news events. I'll also add to the chart, and this has various options as well where you can display the full news list in the output window, etc. This time around I'm going to do that just for demonstration purposes, so you can see all of the news that was processed And we're only going to look at medium impact, high impact news, holiday news, the New York Stock Exchange open and closes. And we want these news events to display on our chart 15 minutes before they actually happen. So let's hit OK. And now on the chart, we see these. I'm going to size this down so we can see these better. On the chart, you see these indicators. This one, you'll notice, says multiple news events. This is the New York Stock Exchange open. That was at 15 minutes before the stock exchange opened. This displayed on the chart. In this case, let's also look over here to the right. On the output window, we can see all the news events for the current week. And this is August 10th, 2022 through August 12th, 2022. And in this case, this is, we click on this bar, we click with the crosshairs on that bar, and we get pop-up to Forex Factory where this news actually resides. We can look at all the details here. I like to refresh the screen to get my time zone times. So here's the events at 5:30 a.m., which appeared on the chart at 5:15. Again, we had 15 minutes notice. We can look at the detail on Forex Factory, and I'm not going to sell Forex Factory here, but that's how this works. On the right event side here, you get a pop-up saying what these events are. It was unemployment claims were announced at 5:30, core PPI, and the PPI forecast was expected down. And so that's what the news events does. It brings Forex Factory news for the week and gives you heads-up dots on your chart. This is also handy if you're in the middle of a very active day trading session and you don't realize or remember that the stock exchange is about to close. This gives you a little notice, heads up, if you have that feature enabled. So I'm going to turn off the browser pop-up so we don't have to see a browser every time we click on a news event. We can instead click on a news event and have it just show us what that is. Oh, New York Stock Exchange close. Okay, so there's your news events. Let's look at some technical analysis indicators. I'm going to leave these informational indicators here because generally every single chart I create has those three as a foundation. Now let's look at the Eclectic Core PMA indicator. This is a technical indicator developed by Eclectic Core. It is, in our knowledge, unique, and it's essentially an oscillator that follows price movement, and it calculates price movement based on the current candle, the previous candle. Honestly, the calculation's a little complicated, but essentially you could think of it as a typical / weighted price on steroids. So it's basically taking the price movement of a bar and determining whether that bar is actually higher or lower from the previous. So in this case, you'll see here that we have a green bar that engulfs the following red bar. And the PMA actually sees that down below. If you see the PMA indicator here, he's actually seeing a slight decline. Even though the close price radically dropped, the PMA is saying, well, this was also an engulfing candle, and so it actually gave less value to that move than the actual close, any indicator based on the close would have done. So that's just one example of the PMA and how it works. And when you factor in the candle sizes and the movement of the previous candle, etc., it begins to show you trending very rapidly, and we find it to be very quick and rapid in its response, saying, hey, we are actually crossing zero here, when a lot of the other indicators don't reveal that for a couple bars later. The PMA tends to pick up on price movement a lot faster, hence why we call it the price movement average. So that's the PMA indicator. Also, you'll notice down on the PMA you've got high-low bars, and they're colored red or green. That's the internal trend. What the PMA believes to be a trend is indicated by a downward trend in red, upward trend in green, obviously. And if we back up here, I want to see some the overbought and oversold regions. So you see down here where this begins to color in orange on the bottom side, that's saying, hey, we've been buying a lot here. We're feeling pressure now to sell. And this is something of an overbought indicator saying, start looking for a move towards the bottom. And as time progresses, we see that, yeah, that move did happen. We look here in this one, we're seeing that pressure, the upward pressure is starting to indicate that we're lopsided in the market. And this one actually didn't sell off very fast. It looks like it consolidated instead, and then over a period of time the market just started to balance out in consolidated state. Again, these are indicators, they're technical analysis, they're not crystal balls. So this is the upward side where we have an oversold condition. The market has been down and now it's saying, hey, it's about time for an upward move. And in this case, it did predict that move, and that move happened shortly after those overbought indicators, or I'm sorry, oversold blue bars started to show there. Over here is where I'm referring to, if you see where the crosshairs are. Okay, so that's the PMA indicator. I'm going to take that off of the chart because I want to focus on the next one. So let's remove him, and we're going to add the smart price indicator. This is another Eclectic Core specific indicator that we believe is unique in the world. And what this does is it calculates the price based on the previous bar as well, but it takes more of an extreme view as far as the price. Is it moving up, down, or sideways? In order to make this more clear, this display mode has all of the EMAs displayed. So I'm going to highlight the smart price, and I'm going to choose a display mode of display nothing, which is not exactly true because that displays the smart price itself only. So this is what we call the smart price. So based on the way the price is moving, it says, in this case, we have a doji bar, but because the price was moving up, it says, you know what, the price actually continued to move up a little bit, even though the doji closed. We see that as a higher move. And then the downward move, we took that clear down to the low, but then because we had two red bars, it says, that's not a low, that's not a high, that's a close. So the smart price chooses which price to use based on the movement of the market. And what this does, once you put an EMA on it, is it gives you a very, a better picture of the price movement than a standard EMA based on merely the close. That's why we call this smart price, because instead of just using one of the single high-low close open prices, it uses it figures out which one to use on each bar. Something let me mention here also, I have been skipping and ignoring this. You'll see that the technical indicators will plop on the chart entry signals. So the smart price indicator is saying it's displaying various entry signals. Again, entry signals are intended to be validated with a trend indicator or something else, but these are just saying, hey, this is probably a good place to enter the market based on this indicator's settings. So back to the PMA. I apologize that I have to do this, but we'll go back to the PMA and we'll see what the PMA had to say on entries as well. And so the PMA, it saw an entry signal here. Why did it see that? Because the price movement had changed, and it actually validates. It takes 2 bars on the PMA before it validates an entry signal. So once the price began to move, it said, hey, we're moving up. We've got 2 bars of up. Let's take an entry. And again, these are intended to be validated with a trend indicator, which I'll talk about more once we get to the strategies. Okay, so that's just a couple of the technical indicators. Just to give you an example in the list here, all of these indicators that begin with EKV4 most of these are technical indicators that provide both entry and trend. Some of them provide entries without trend, but that's very rare. Most of them provide both entry and trend. Oh, there is just one more. Actually, we want to talk now about some standard popular indicators, and these are indicators that are pretty well known in any trading platform. Let's first look at the VWAP. This is the volume weighted average price. Anybody that has used any kind of trading platform anywhere understands what volume weighted average price is. If you don't know what that means, go to Investopedia. But this middle line that is red or green is showing the current trend, detected trend, and the volume weighted average price. Basically, detected trend is the price trading above or below the volume weighted. So if you're trading below the volume weighted price, then that's considered to be a downward trend. If you're trading above it, it's considered to be an upward trend, even though the volume weighted average price is still in a declining EMA. It's suggesting that this is a reversal pattern. So the VWAP, our VWAP, does have something slightly unique. Instead of using standard deviation based off of the single VWAP clothesline, what we do is we use standard deviation based on highs and lows to produce our outer bars. And again, this just shows you a little bit of an indication of when consolidation is happening and when there's bizarre movement in the extreme sides of the candles. So here you'll see that we have just regular sized candles over here to the left, but then we start getting to these enormous candles, which are way out of line for the average candle size or the average volatility that we've been seeing. And because of that, you'll see this standard deviation line crosses and it goes beyond. In an ordinary VWAP, you would never have that because it's simply a multiplier. But this shows you, hey, there's something screwy going on here because of the way that we plot our additional VWAP support lines on the outside. Okay, so that's the VWAP. Another very well-known popular indicator. I'm going to also show you the MACD. The MACD is perhaps arguably the single most popular indicator on the planet. If you don't know what the MACD is, again, go to Investopedia. You can get all the details there. The default MACD is colored the same. The histogram is colored the same. So we basically took the MACD and made it a little easier to interpret in a hurry. So we colored the ups and downs, and we took the EMA lines, which are generally colored different, and we tried to just make them less obtrusive by making them gray. They're still visible. They're still apparent which one's fast and slow. But again, we wanted them to be less in the way so that the histogram and the trend could be more apparent at a glance. You'll also notice that our MACD is providing entry signals. Good old-fashioned MACD entries are based on the fast EMA crossing the slow EMA, and that's exactly what these entry signals do, and that's all they do. So essentially, when the histogram crosses 0, you get an entry signal. From down to up, it's an up signal. From up to down, it's a down signal. And that's the MACD. Now, we did take our MACD another step further, and that is we added a feature we call here include trending entries. So instead of just producing entry signals when the MACD crosses, we thought, well, maybe if we're in a downward trend, for example, right here, you'll see the white ball is the standard MACD entry, but then you've got this gold ball, which is right in the middle of the downward histogram. And we said, okay, if we have a downward trend, let's get an entry signal in the middle of the trend in case we want to do a second entry or, you know, whatever. Those are simple. Those signals are based on when the histogram has a reversal. In other words, we call them valleys and peaks. Here you'll see it went up, then down again, so you got a signal. And whenever you get that 3 bars where it moves up and then down, you get a down signal on the downside. If it goes down and then up, you get an up signal on the upside. That's what this bar here is, the up signal in the middle of the trend. And so what that does is it gives you many, many extra entry signals that are not traditional MACD. But again, if you're trading, if you're day trading, you might want those signals, and we include those as an option if you do. Okay, third standard indicator, and I say standard, this one is the stacked EMA. stacked DMA indicator is just something that some traders use to show, to validate trend. And so you'll notice that this stacked DMA, when I just added it, there's this big empty gap. So we added a feature. If you refresh your chart, it will size that down and make the indicator very small and compressed. The three top little bars show the position of the EMAs in relation to each other. This is based on typical Fibonacci EMAs, 8, 13, 21, and 34. So if 8 is above 13, then this is green. If 8 is below 13, this is red. If 13 is above 21, you get green and red. If 21 is above 34, you get green and red. So when all three of them are lined up together, then you get a green. The big thick bar at the bottom is saying, yeah, we have a steady, solid trend in the stacked DMA. You say, well, then what's these little gold places where the trend is broken? That is because the price action itself broke the 8 EMA. And so if there was a movement where the price started to break the EMA and it looks like, look, we know that the EMAs are still aligned, but we're just giving you a little bit of a warning that this may be the end of this trend. Again, we break that trend when the price action starts to look like it's moving the opposite direction. So that's the stack. You can use the top three by themselves just to get a quick view of whether they're aligned, and the bottom thick one is a summary of whether the three EMAs and the price themselves, the price itself is aligned. Okay, a fourth common market indicator that is, again, popular in many other platforms is the DM, directional movement. And so because that panel got resized, it's still too small, so I'm going to take it off entirely, and we'll add the DM back at full size. There we go. So this is just a standard DM. Again, it's got regular standard DM entry points when there are crossovers of the DMI, DM plus, DM minus. You can go to Investopedia to get all the details on how that works. This is simply our version that is colored and stylized to make trend apparent. If you've got a green, then that's an upward trend, red, a downward trend, etc. So these entries and trends are important now that we're going to talk for just a moment about strategies. So I'm going to take, we want to test a strategy. Let's say, well, we've got DM a DM at period 14 on the screen. So let's say we're going to add a strategy. We want to test if the DM actually trades well on an ES 5-minute chart. So we add a universal strategy to our configured strategies list, and then we choose the DM indicator for our entry indicator. We set the period to 14 to match the chart. We choose the DM indicator for our trend indicator, and we also set the period to 14 to match the chart. On the ES, just for kicks and grins, we're going to go for 12 ticks profit, and we'll go for 10 ticks loss just to try to make our loss less than our profit. And we're going to say if we hit negative 40 ticks in a session, stop trading. And we only want to trade between these times, midnight to 6:15. We're not going to trade during the opening bell. So from 6:15 to 8, we're going to be off, turn everything off. From 8 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., we're going to trade. Then we're going to shut down till 7 o'clock. Then we're going to turn on at 7 o'clock for overnight trading until 11:59. And then again, midnight picks up at the end of that. So here's our strategy, basically running all day long. I'm going to clear our output window so that we can see the output from the strategy. And I enable that strategy, and instantly it runs through the entire historical bars, which here we see are from July 27th to August 11th. So we're looking at about 2 weeks of data, a little bit more than 2 weeks of data. The DM strategy using 3-point profit, 2.5-point loss, it scored right down here. We get a summary, and it says we scored 40% wins, 60% losses. So the DM strategy on a 5-minute ES is not doing well in this market. We can also see a summary that our stats said we lost over that period of 2 weeks. We lost 8.5 points, which translates into 194 points won, 7.5 points lost, and 35 points that were closed out. What does this mean? This means when a entry reverses, if we have a short entry and then a long entry is detected, it will close the short entry regardless of where it is, and it'll place the long entry. And so the shorts and longs that partially lost, that's total of negative 35. So we also estimate our earnings on one contract. This is with a lifetime license. Had we run this strategy since July 27th, we would have lost $1,100. So clearly that's a bad strategy. So you say, well, okay, we don't need to do DM. We've got a lot of other options. We want to stay on the 5-minute chart for now. Let's try a MACD strategy. And we're going to put MACD in. MACD's default is 12 bars. And this uses 12, 26, and 9, the standard MACD. We'll use the same profit and loss targets just to see how MACD compares to DM. Now we run that. We see that MACD scored 39% loss. It placed a lot more entries, and it destroyed us. We lost $2,500 in 2 weeks. So the MACD strategy on the 5-minute chart isn't working. So what are we seeing? We're seeing two well-known popular indicators that are failing on a 5-minute chart. So what do? Let's clear this chart. We're going to leave this strategy running. Let's change this chart to a 1-minute chart and see how those indicators perform on a 1-minute. The MACD is still running. He's now only running from August 9th through August 11th because the 1-minute chart, we have it restricted to, I think, 1,000 or 3,000 bars. So in this scenario, he lost 37% of all entries. So again, this is still not working. The point is not whether the strategy works or not. The point is that you can quickly deduce and backtest a strategy to find out not only if it works, but how well it works. So generally speaking, when I'm starting an automated strategy, I will start off with the smart price at 25 bars or 25 period. So let's do smart price on both sides, and we'll do 25 bars on either side. Same profit and loss. Let's see how that does. And the smart price in this same exact scenario, it won 50% and actually ended in profit of $1,000 over the last 3 days had we run that. So again, this is just an example, but the smart price strategy in this case is a 50-50 strategy, but because the profit is higher than the loss, it tends to do better, even better than the DM and better than the MACD on the exact same chart. Okay, so that's just a quick overview. This is by no means a in-depth tutorial, just an example of how the system works, how the back testing is done very rapidly. I didn't go back and show that this shows every single entry or every single session summary. There is an option here on the strategy. If you decide that you say, I want to see verbose output right here, you can choose verbose output, clear this and run it, and when you do that, you will get details on every single bar. It will show you the status of the trend, the status of the entry, whether it took the entry, why it, and again, it's verbose if you're into that kind of data. One other thing I do want to show on the strategy is if you're of the mindset that you want to do Excel spreadsheet analysis at the end of the day, you can enable here this option called statistics tracking. I'll turn off verbose. And if you enable statistics tracking, watch the output 2 tab will get a little star on it because the strategy outputs its details to output 1, but on output 2, it dumps a spreadsheet of the entire day or the entire back test. And if we copy this, we can open Excel, paste that into Excel, and analyze it to our heart's content. So that's also one of the backtest analysis features of our strategy program. All right, that's it for today. If you have any questions, feel free to go to the contact tab and shoot an email. Thanks.